and whatever their views are to help us to distill what the effects on education immediately and over the long term will be. So we are glad that you're here and we thank you very much. We have a distinguished panel of teachers coming from Kenya, Germany, Uganda, India, and the USA. So this is new to us, but we are very thankful that many of them have taken the time very early in the morning and some much later in the afternoon and in Nairobi in the mid-afternoon. So thank you very much and welcome. As I said, the Institute of Economic Affairs is a think tank. We carry out research on public affairs, and we use that to inform public decisions in Kenya. We've been holding a series of webinars on the effects of COVID-19. It's definitely a different issue. We carry out economic research, but our work is just basically to provide a platform for Kenyans and people globally now to exchange views and to learn from each other. So without further ado, I'll go to my colleague, Winnie, who's actually the convener of this discussion. So she'll provide an introduction and context setting for just about 10 minutes. And thereafter, we will go to the main presentations, which will come from these teachers who've joined us. So just as we start, I'll wave to all of them and let's all wave back at each other. Thank you very much. And thanks for being here. Good morning and everyone else. So let's go to Winnie. We'll have her screen. And thereafter, we'll take a small poll, which will be published after her. And then we'll go to the teachers who have the agenda for today. Thanks a lot. Winnie?
All right, thank you, Kwame, for that introduction. Thank you, and thank you everyone for making time to join us and just have this conversation. And we believe teachers are the frontline workers. We've been talking about the health sector and talking about doctors and nurses. And so for the education sector, we believe that the teachers are the frontline workers for the sector. And that is why we felt it was important that we also hear from the teachers, not only from Kenya, because COVID-19 is a global pandemic, but we also listen to teachers from other parts of the world, and just listen to what exactly is going on in their countries. So yes, just to give us a very quick overview of what we expect is, one, we want to understand the main reason why we are here, which is the why, because we are all aware. Sorry, something went wrong. I disappeared. Can you hear me? And we all disappeared in the office.
Yes, I can hear you, Winnie.
Can hear you. Can hear you.
We can hear you, Winnie.
Yeah, we can.
Oh?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello.
We are so sorry. Technical issues from the office. We're in the office, so we all disappeared for a minute or so, but we are now back. We are so sorry about that. So back to what you were back to what we were speaking about. Okay, I believe we can all see that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So we are here because of COVID-19 and the impact it has had on the different sectors globally, with education being one of the sectors that has been badly hit by the pandemic. The COVID-19 definitely, we all know, started as a health issue, but trickled down and affected all sectors globally. And because of how highly infectious the pandemic, disease is, there are certain measures that were put in place, for instance, social distancing, as part of the precautionary measures that were put globally, so that we could slow down the infection cases that we were getting. So we have to understand that 7.8 billion, which is the total world population, is the number of people who have been affected in one way or the other by the pandemic. Out of the 7.8 billion number of people globally, 1.5 billion, which is 20% of the total population, is the number of learners that have been affected by this pandemic. So in terms of this, for this conversation today, we are talking to teachers from 5 countries. We have India, Uganda, United States, Kenya, and Germany. In India, we have approximately 320.7 million learners who've been affected by this pandemic. In Uganda, we have approximately 10.6 billion. In the United States, we have approximately 76 million. In Kenya, we have 15.3 million, and in Germany, 8.3 million. For the United States, Kenya, and Germany, the numbers of the affected learners you're seeing on your screen are from high school going down. We have not included TVET and tertiary institutions. So just to give us a quick roundup of the interventions so far, we are aware that the first directive that we were given was to stay home. And once we were asked to stay home, then came the issue of what happens to our children who are going to school. And that's when we were told children who are school going also have to stay home. So parents are working from home and children are also learning from home. And then it brings in the element of virtual learning, which again has come with so many unforeseen issues that we didn't see. Some challenges, it has come with some challenges. For instance, we have inequality as far as rural and urban households are concerned. Because if you compare, for instance, in Kenya, we have a total of 12 million households. But out of the 12 million, if you look at urban and rural areas, for instance, who have access to, let's say, a computer, we have approximately 18% having access in urban areas and 3% having access in the rural areas. So clearly, it just comes out to show that if we decide to use computers, those in the rural areas will definitely be so disadvantaged, because 3% means approximately 3 out of 100 households, or 3 out of 10. Or roughly 1 point something out of 10 have access to a computer. So clearly we can't then say that they'll be benefiting the same. And then again, if you look in terms of the number of households that have access to radio, in the urban areas, we only have 54% in Kenya who have an access to a radio, and in the rural areas, we have 59%. Again, if you look at that number and you look at the number of learners who are affected by the pandemic, you clearly can see, well, if we use the radio, we'll get some level of penetration, but we are not too sure in those households how many children we will be accessing. So definitely virtual learning came with its own challenges. And then we have the localized interventions, where we have seen countries opening up certain states. For instance, in the States, and I think Caroline will be speaking to this, we have seen some states, as much as they said learners should not go to school, in some states it is not mandatory. We still have states that have probably kids going to school. And just to give us a very quick look at this map, I hope, can we all see the map?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so if you look at this, if this is a map, this map was created by UNESCO. They're also trying to look at the number of learners who've been affected by this pandemic. And if you look at Kenya, for instance, the total number is 15.27, and it gives you a breakdown for pre-primary, primary, secondary, and tertiary. And if you look at that breakdown, then you realize that the hardest hit are those who are receiving basic education. Because if you look at basic education, we look at pre-primary and primary schools and secondary, you realize that, for instance, in Kenya, about 16.1 million, about 10.3 million students are not benefiting. So if you look at that, you get a breakdown. And then if you look at Uganda, for instance, as well, Uganda has 10.6 roughly number of students who've been affected. And again, it gives us a breakdown of the number of pre-primary, primary, secondary, and tertiary. You can get the numbers from here, just how badly basic education has been affected. So that is just a quick a very brief description of what exactly is happening so that we can be able to understand when we are talking about the number of students who've been affected, and then we are looking at these countries that we have chosen, you see the numbers are very high. And as much as we are coming up with interventions, you also realize that probably we are not listening to teachers enough, and it is high time that we started listening to teachers and also just get their views on what they feel the impact COVID-19 has had on education and on their learners, and what they perceive to be a way forward, because they're the frontline workers and they're the people who deal with this sector every day. So we cannot have this conversation. We've been talking about COVID-19 and the impact it has on education, and we are not listening to teachers more. So today we just want to listen to teachers from across the globe so that they give us their perspective of what exactly is happening in their country, and what interventions they're putting in place, and how well it is working, and what are some of the lessons we can learn from this pandemic. If should we be hit by another one, what will we do better, or what will we not do to ensure that learning continues? So just to quickly mention, with us today we have teachers from Kenya, Germany, Uganda, India, and and Germany. So from Kenya, we have Mrs. Nelly Okadia. Mrs. Nelly Okadia is a teacher in one of the schools in Nairobi, and where she teaches Kiswahili, and she's actually the head of the Kiswahili department at Nairobi School, and she has been a teacher for over 30 years. And from Germany, we have Miss Rachel Okongo. Miss Rachel is a Kenyan, yes, but she lives and works in Germany, and she is a teacher at a school called Christburg campus, and she is also a mentor for one of the University of Potsdam. And we also have Miss Martha Mbaka. Martha Mbaka is a teacher is an educationist from Uganda. She is an education manager who has worked with the kindergarten and primary schools for close to 10 years, and currently she is a director at a nursery and primary school. And then we have with us Miss Mohini Negi and Miss Dimple Negi, mother and daughter. We are very happy to have the both of them on board, because Miss Mohini they're both from the northern part of India, and Ms. Mohini has been teaching social studies for the last 26 years. Dimple is a political science and education student, and she is helping her mom just to because of the transition to how to use digital tools to ensure that their students are still continuing with their learning. So both of them are together. So they'll be speaking. Mohini will give us a perspective of how it has been for her, and Dimple will be, being the person who's been supporting the mom, will also give us her experience with the digital transition. And then we also have Miss Caroline Ogutu. Caroline Ogutu is also a Kenyan, but she now lives in the United States, Arizona. And she is also an elementary school teacher. So we believe from all the six that we have, we will gather insights on what is working and what is not working and what we should do. So without saying too much, I'd like to invite Miss Nelly Okadia. Miss Nelly Okadia will give us a perspective from the Kenyan angle, and we'll just hear her insights. Miss Nelly?
Okay, thank you, Winnie. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I will talk about Kenya, and because I was told I have just 10 minutes, I can you hear me, Winnie?
Yes, I
Can you?
can. Yes, I can.
Okay. Now, I do teach in a high school in Kenya that is a public school. And so even as I talk, I think I'll be talking more on the public schools, much more than the private. And we do have 844 in our schools. And the 844 system is currently being phased out. We have CBC coming in, that is competency-based curriculum, that is with the lower grade students, that is up to class 4, grade 4 now, from pre-primary to grade 4. And we have many students. As Winnie has already mentioned, we have about 15.3 million students who are now at home because of what happened. Actually, if we may remember, on the 15th, the president did order the schools to shut down so that we could try and manage the COVID-19 once we realized that it had come to our country. Now, because of what has happened, I think I will not go into much detail about the education system that we have in our country, but we do have an academic calendar that normally runs from January with a break in April of 3 weeks, a break of another 3 weeks in August, and a break of another about 2 months, November, December, except for those who are candidates. Now, candidates are the ones who take an exam, KCPE class 8 primary, and then the KCSE Form 4s, that is the high schoolers who finish their sorry. So the high schoolers do have an exam at the end of the year, KCSE. They normally take their exam beginning of November for a month, and then they end of November. KCPE was supposed to be taking place end of October. And so here we are, the students, the learners are all at home. And because of this, we have had people having different measures, you know. Some of us teachers are trying to teach students, and I know especially the private schools, most of them are doing well, especially those ones that are around Nairobi, the international schools, they're doing well. They're having almost 100% digital learning. But for public schools like ours, here we are, we are really having problems. So now some of the things that are happening to us because of what has happened so far is that people have resorted to different ways of making sure that this learning takes place, but then it is a bit difficult. Like some of the ways that we are coping to try and make sure that learning takes place, we have like direct phone calls. We would have some parents calling or some students calling, because most of the times the parents would have our numbers and they call directly and they ask questions and they ask for directions on certain issues, certain topics that they would want to have help with. And then sometimes they would ask for clarification. And we have a few teachers doing online teaching via Zoom and the other applications that are there. And we would also have some teachers sending learning materials, sending notes. They also send question papers. They also send some sort of exams to these through the parents to the students. And some of them would end up sending them back. They get printed, and then the teacher would mark, and then maybe you send back again to the parent. And it's been very hectic for us. And sometimes this printing is not very easy for the teachers who are doing it. And another thing that we know, and I think Winnie already mentioned, is that the government has been trying to encourage parents to use the radio programs, especially that are being done by the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. And then we also have TV programs that are being done by the same. There are some teachers that have been engaged by the KICD, Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, and they are teaching different subjects, different days. So there's a timetable for that. And we do encourage our students to be able to take their time and watch. So there are those who watch it, but then you can't believe it that even me, I've never been able to access it. I don't know. The channel is just, I've not been able to access it. I'm not able to. I don't know why. And many of my colleagues are saying the same. And so I imagine even many of the students are not able to access that channel. It is one of the KBC channels. And so many teachers are teaching there. They have quite a number of teachers going through the languages. They have also been doing the mathematics and the sciences, basically. And those who are able to access it, yes, can do that. And then I also know that there are teachers who send voice notes. One of my colleagues who teaches maths normally would do, she had a WhatsApp group with her students, and she would explain to them concepts via voice notes, and they would ask questions there. They write the questions that they have, and then she would attempt to answer. Then another thing that we do is why is it escaping my mind? Another thing that we do, yeah, I know we do voice notes also. You do an explanation and then send to the students, and then they can also do voice notes and also ask. And so, you know, especially through the WhatsApp groups. And my other colleagues also, I know there are colleagues, especially in the private schools, who would also use podcasts where they would explain concepts to students and then have it out in the internet, and the students can always refer to it. So I think that basically that is what we have been trying to do to try and manage the situation. I can't call it learning per se, because it's a totally new thing to us, and then we are not sure that it is getting to our students. We are not sure. We are yet to find out if that is working. Now, the challenges with that, I think we are all aware that it's not easy for many of our students to access the internet. One, because of electricity, accessibility to electricity. It is not with, I would say, a majority of Kenyans, especially those who live in the rural areas, and sometimes even in the slums, some of them don't have electricity. And two, even if they have it, some don't have internet access. And even where they have internet access, it's very costly, it's very expensive, buying bundles and, you know, being able to keep up. And another challenge that we have there is power outages. In fact, just before we started, we didn't have power here. And I was saying, now I don't know what's going to happen. So we have power outages. Even those who can access the internet, sometimes there are power outages. And when that happens, and maybe a teacher is teaching, for those who are able to, then we have a lot of interferences. You know, you disconnect from what you are saying, and you have to start, and you lose some along the way, and something like that. So internet access is a very, very big challenge. Many don't have. Now, I'll give an example of our school, where so far we are just dealing with the candidates. That is the ones who are supposed to be sitting for KCSE 2020. We have 374 boys, 374. And so far, the ones that we are able to access, those who are able to join the classes via Zoom and Google Meet and the other apps, are about, we would have between 150 to around 180, 200 when there are very many. So out of this, it means we are dealing with about half of the students. We miss out on so many. Now, this is because ours being a national school, we also get students from across the nation, and they are coming from all over the country, and some of them are in the villages where they don't have access to this. A few struggle to go to the cyber caves that are around them, and they have to walk or they have to take matatus, or they have to go to those small shopping centers where at least there's a cyber cafe so that they can access the learning. And it's a bit difficult for them, they say so. So we have that issue with the internet, and so we lose out on so many of our students. That is the Form 4s, that is the candidates. But then we have these others from 1 to Form 3. Now the Form 1 to Form 3, I think for the public schools, because even as I talk to my colleagues, we have just forgotten them. We don't remember that we have Form 1s and Form 3s. I think because the teachers cannot cope to have programs for the Form 4s and also have programs for the Form 1 to 3. And my greatest concern actually are the Form 1s who just joined school in January, and we learned they had a break for midterm. And when we came back, as we were settling down, we had to close school. So I'm just thinking that they were just getting into high school and were beginning to teach them some of the new concepts, especially because they are picking up subjects that they were not having before in primary school. And now there's this long break. So I'm seeing a situation where we might just have to relook at everything that we have been doing with them. So the Form 1 to Form 3 are missing out completely from our program, the online teaching. And then another thing that I can say, basically on behalf of the others that are coming from schools that are not as privileged probably as ours, where all of them are probably in the village. So those are places where even for the Form 4s, nothing is going on. So learning has actually stopped for them. And then the second thing I want to talk about this challenge is supervision. I have had some students and even some parents also indicate that the learners, especially those ones at lower levels, you know, those in primary and even some of them in high school, they need a lot of supervision. Sometimes when the parents are not there, it is hard for them to concentrate. And we actually had a case of one of the girls' school, also a national school, where our students were learning there was cyber hacking, and somebody actually posted pornographic material to the students. So it means that the parents must be around every time. And I think this supervision becomes a big issue. It's not easy for parents always to be there. Some of them are working out, some are working in, and so it's hard. And some have more than one child, and it's difficult for them to concentrate on all of them when they are learning. And then another thing that we have seen, even as you teach online, you have limited interaction with your students because you have to, you don't have enough time to really get to see, are they getting what you're saying? Are they not getting? They cannot ask as many questions as they would if you're in class every time. And sometimes you would have extra time. They can follow you. They can out of class between changeover. They can come to the staff room and ask questions. So there's a lot of limited interaction. And you know, like now you can't see all of them when you're teaching, so you don't know the expressions that they are having. Are they understanding? Are they not understanding? Something that you'll be able to tell if you're having a face-to-face talk with your students. So we are lacking that. It's very limited interaction because body language of students can tell you a lot of where they are, whether they are bored, whether they want to doze off, or whatever it is that they are doing. You can be able to tell when you are with them physically. And then it's also hard for you to check the work that they are doing, especially the languages, you know, the ones that I teach, like Kiswahili, even the mathematics, where they need to do a lot of exercises so that you can gauge how they are doing. It's difficult. Maths and languages mostly would have at least an exercise or two each day to keep them on their toes and to make you see if they are getting the concept. So we don't have this. We can't do this every day. One of the other challenges is also students in discipline. You know, sometimes you're teaching and some of them are sending funny texts, and sometimes we've had situations where students just come in and you see they are there And after a short while, it's like they walk away because you call them and they're not there and you can see they're supposed to be with you. So they walk away, or maybe they go to do other things. They just come in so that their parents can know that they were there with you. So we have indisciplined cases of students just doing what they want and you think they are there. Like now, I can't tell whether you people are there. I can just see people's initials. I don't know whether they are there. So that sometimes happens and you wonder whether the students are really concentrating. So I think there's a lot of, there's less concentration and not much learning is taking place, And another challenge is the difficulty in assessing the students' work, especially the practicals. We have subjects where students have projects. And if I talk about the candidates again, we have like something like art and design. They have a project that normally needs a lot of follow-up with the teacher. And now that they are home, that has stopped, And we have like agriculture. The students would have small chambers and they would have gardens that they would plant crops and they would be checked at every stage and how they are doing. So I'm imagining that their chambers are now, they are not taken care of, the gardens are not taken care of, and we don't know what will happen, computer projects. So these are problems that we are facing right now. And some of the key learnings that I have seen and that I would say, even as I finish, to me, this is personal. To me, we need more day schools. Why? Because I'm thinking of a situation where all the students are around where they live. They go to school around where they live. We do not have students who are learning from coming from so far to go to school. And I think this is a concern that probably the government needs to reconsider, even as they think about reopening schools. Why? Because what is going to happen as we go back, I'm assuming that COVID-19 might not clear immediately. So we might still need the social distancing. We might still need to have the spaces in between, and our schools are so overcrowded. So if we have so many students and they have to sleep in one dorm and they're so close to one another, then this is bound to bring a problem. So I've just been thinking some of the things that need to happen. We need to embrace more day schools. We need to have more schools so that we can have fewer students in them and also have them live close by. And things like checking their practicals, like those agriculture projects that I was talking about, if there were day schools, and probably we have a partial lockdown like we have in Kenya around Nairobi and the metropolis, then it's possible for a student even to reach school and check their work and go back home, because we are allowed to move around, at least so long as we are not crowded. So if you had more day schools, and then I'm also thinking the government could reconsider having more teachers, to decongest the classes, because we have classes of up to 65 students, and I understand that some schools even have more per class. So, and the primary schools, especially the public ones, are so congested. So when people go back to school and we still want to have the social distancing, what is going to happen? So I think the onus is on the government, maybe to bring in more teachers so that the classes can be fewer, and then we can be able to observe the distancing that we need. And another thing I've seen is that we need to enhance e-learning, have accessibility to electricity, have accessibility to the gadgets that are needed, because so many students don't have these gadgets. And I don't know if there's a way in which the government can partner with private sector so that we can even have smartphones that students can be able to use when such things happen, wherever they are. Then we need probably the mobile service providers sponsoring students with data bundles. I don't know how this can be done so that all the students can be able to be there, because it really makes me sad knowing that very many of my students, if I can't reach almost 200 students, then it's like no work is going on. So even as I conclude, I want to think that for me, who is a public school teacher, I don't know whether I can say learning has been going on. I think I can only say that probably we've kept some of the students busy during this time. And then we have also forgotten that their mentality is also distressed because of what's going around. They have a lot of anxiety. And so I don't know whether they are learning really, or we are just keeping them busy. And so I think that's what I have to say. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Nelly, for giving us that perspective from a Kenyan context, and just listening in and hearing some of the challenges that we admittably have. And as she has clearly put, there are issues of accessibility, especially for the tools that are being suggested to be used for online learning. A lot of children cannot get access to it, especially those in the rural areas. And remember, even in the urban area, we still have urban slum dwellers who also have challenges, who having electricity in their homes is such a privilege. So not all of them have access to electricity. So those are some of the issues that we are struggling with here in Kenya. And even in terms of the lessons that we give to our children, some of these lessons are so practical that giving them, like she's rightly put, like something like agriculture. We have children who actually have to go to the garden. So you wonder how they'll go to the garden virtually. And there are some practical lessons that we cannot offer online. So I guess based on what we are hearing from the Kenyan perspective, as we proceed to hear from Ms. Rachel Okongo, who's from Germany, I think we slowly identify with some of these challenges. So Ms. Rachel Okongo will give us a German perspective, and then we'll see what are some of the similarities we have between Germany and Kenya. Are our challenges and our learnings the same? And then we'll proceed like that. So Rachel, you have 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
So, good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon here. So, thank you for letting me be part of this, Winnie. So, for people who don't know the German education system, Germany has 16 federal states, and all these federal states have their own ministries of education where they make their own decisions how schooling is supposed to be done. But the big umbrella in the whole country is that children stay in primary school for either 4 or 6 years, and then they go to middle school where they stay for another 3 or 4 years, depending on the state. And after that, they can go for vocational training, which we basically call colleges back at home or everywhere else. And the ones who decide I need to do something else after my middle school go for their A levels, and those are the ones we send to the university. So the interesting thing about Germany is in primary school, the primary school teacher decides whether you're university material or not. So even our schools are divided into grammar schools right after secondary school, or into a middle school where we think, well, you belong more to a more technical or handiwork career kind of thing. So that's to Germany and its education. So I work for the state of Berlin, and I teach at the state of Potsdam at the university at the higher level. And COVID came as a big surprise for many people. And in as much as we have much more developed infrastructure in comparison to Nairobi, we also faced lots of challenges. First of all, it was, we have very aged teachers, like most teachers are over 50, so they're not very acquainted with the internet or like the latest kind of thing. And I know in our team, guys were like, I can't do this, my kids have to help me do this. Because when we knew we were going home, we were warned a week in advance, get prepared, either give the materials for the kids for the next 3 weeks. It just came before our Easter break, around the 6th of March. And we were like, okay, we need to get everything done. So the older generation of teachers decided to prepare work, their lesson schemes for the next 3 weeks and give them to the kids so they didn't have to get involved with online learning. Well, the rest thought, well, we could try. So most of Germany just skipped into online schooling on Teams, Zoom, and everything else that's out there, which was a good thing. But also with this thing, we have the problem of social inequality. It's amazing in this country, and the people who are mostly affected with social inequality are, again, migrant children, because most don't have parents in academia, so many gadgets are lacking at home because most parents do not the white collar jobs, but anything else. So if my mom is a cleaner and I go home and say, Mom, I need the internet, she'll be like, what for? And why can't your teacher send you stuff? Because we still have a different mentality when we come from back home. So one of the issues we are dealing with right now is that the social inequality gap between the haves and have-nots of this society is actually getting wider. And even with the online learning, we are lucky to be in a place where internet is accessible for everyone else. Power shortcuts, like we know them back in Kenya, are actually close to nil or never, maybe once in 4 years. So we could manage to get our children online learning. The state of Berlin, for instance, sent schools a mail and said, find out which of your students does not have all the technical gadgets at home, and provided iPads for all the children who could not access online learning, which was a very good thing. But the thing is now for the teacher, you have to train the pupils. So in as much as you need to distance, you still have to find a way of reaching the family and actually explain to them what they need to do. And with online learning, it was good. We managed to divide our learning groups. First of all, German learning groups are very small, unlike Kenya, where we have 40, 50 kids in a class. In a primary school, we have at most 25, and in a high school, we have at most 30. And we do have a teacher-student ratio of 1 to 12. So one teacher has at most 12 pupils or 12 students to take care of, which makes it very easy to access the students. So online learning was not so difficult. Not so difficult because we could access students, we could divide the learning groups. Like currently our kids are back to school, but we still have online learning going concurrently, and we've learned that a group of 12 is actually too big, so we're reducing our groups to a group of 6, so you can have more pupil student interaction to see if there's really learning effect, are the learning goals being met. And during the COVID, we also had companies that ideally are not interested in education all of a sudden start offering things, learning resources for pupils, and they were all free, either on the media or on YouTube and anywhere else on social media. So we managed to like get kids covered for, but then again, it's only, do you have a parent who knows where to find the information? So most of this online learning at home was not only dependent on, does the teacher send the information, but is the parent also proactive enough to look for information out there? Now, we've been lucky enough or fortunate enough to be back to school. We've been back to school for 3 weeks right now. And one of the biggest challenges we have faced and we are still facing is hygiene. How do we manage to keep the class disinfected? So currently we have two different, like a class of ideally 24 children is divided now into 2 sub-learning groups. So one group comes either this week and the next week, or it comes today and the next day. And the big issue is, how do we cater for the group that is not in class? How do we manage not to overwork the teacher who's in class with the same class, or a half of this class? How do we cater for the other group and make sure they're still also getting their learning goals met? And with all this disinfecting and distancing, does it really work? Because in as much as classrooms are big, we still cannot manage to keep all of them in. The next big issue is, what do we do with high-risk students or students who come from families that face a high risk of contracting the virus? Do we let them come to school or not? So the state decided, as long as you're a high risk person, you can stay home. So these kids are staying home. So we are still finding a way. It's still a challenge, getting a way. How do we keep them involved in the class lesson without really losing them? How do they manage to be a part of this learning group without being completely lost? And the next issue is, given that most teachers, or some teachers, let's say 20% is basically over 50, no, over 60, and pension is in Germany is at 67. They actually already belong to the high risk patients. So ideally they cannot come to work. Who covers up for them? Who meets this gap of teachers who are missing work? Because we cannot expect them to put themselves at risk when they come to work. And how do they, now another issue is, how do they manage, hopefully, to provide their lessons from home to within the school institution? Because not all school institutions are technically prepared to offer these lessons from home. It's easier doing it on an end-to-end gadget like we are now on our different laptops, but it is difficult doing it from home to a school that just has a blackboard and not a whiteboard. How do you do that? And the next big challenge is, given that most candidates like Kenya were prepared to do exams. So I'll start with primary school. Our kids do their exams in a span of 1 year. The pre-last year of primary school counts for the high school. So the kids that have already lost this time, how do we gain it? And how do we determine what high school they go to? And the next thing is the ones who are getting prepared for the university, how do they do their exams? Because most of the German exam, it's a 4-day thing, and many could not come because they were risk patients, or we also have some students are just tense. It's a tense situation for everyone. It's difficult for a grown-up. So imagine being forced to sit an exam that's going to determine where your life goes to. That's a very difficult thing to do. So we had them come, and we've had to cancel some papers also. So we've just had to say, this is not important right now. Like most of the time we have presentation exams where they go and do their own PowerPoint presentation about a topic they have researched on for a while. So that has had to be canceled. The problem is, if it's someone who's going for vocational training, how will the company that wants to employ them and train them decide they actually understood what they want to do? Because companies will look at this profile before they employ you or before they give you this vocational training position. You really don't have something to market yourself. So that's something the policymakers and the politicians and everyone else is currently battling with to see what else can be done. Yeah, and so right now we are at a point where we're thinking, okay, education has to be digitized. And because I am in the teacher training at the university as well, I have students, the students I'm currently mentoring this semester. Ideally, they usually come to real classrooms and deal with real students. Now they're forced to come to virtual classrooms and deal with students they actually cannot even assess, because like the person who talked before me said, you really need to see a student to gauge their behavior. Have they understood you? Did you bring your point across well? So that's something the current trainee teachers are actually lacking. They do not know, am I coming across, am I doing the right thing? And for myself as a mentor, I'm thinking, do I free them? Do I let them pass and let them go work? But have they really learned what they need to learn? So we are also looking right now, how do we remodel the education system for, in case this thing happens again, are we prepared? Are we preparing the coming teachers also to come and deal with this? Yeah, so I think I took 2 minutes longer than I needed to.
Okay, Rachel, thank you for giving us insights from Germany. And what I'm picking is, as far as social inequality gaps are concerned, I believe I'll be hearing this from across all these countries, because that's a reality that is here with us, and it's a reality that is here to stay for as long as it takes for these gaps to be closed. And it's not like we're closing it anytime soon. So yes, the social inequality gaps is also a challenge we're having in Kenya, as rightly put by Ms. Okadia. And then in terms of hygiene, you heard Mrs. Okadia say that we have students as high as 60 in a class. I'll give an example of where my mom teaches. My mom is also a teacher, and in her school, they have a bench where we have as high a number as 7 students sharing that bench. So you can imagine what happens in that class. And then for group learning, I actually can identify with that as well, because it's something that I'm aware certain private schools, like where my daughter goes to school, they're trying it out. And it's really not working out as we expected. Because we, as parents, you forget your timings and you're joining another group that is ahead, and you have to be reminded this is not your group, it's that other group. So of course, even for parents, it's still a challenge that we need to adjust to. So I'd love to hear from Ms. Martha, who is also from Uganda, so that we can also hear what's actually happening in Uganda and what are these things that we can pick. Martha, you have 10 minutes. Karibu.
Martha, I think your microphone is muted. Please
Muted.
unmute your microphone. Martha, please unmute your microphone.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you
Yes,
now.
we can, Martha. Yeah.
Hi, ladies.
Hi.
How are you? I am very happy to be here, and I have a colleague with me whose name is Jamil. He's a teacher who actually is more than a teacher, you know? So I invited him here last minute because I think these issues pertain more to him, and allow me invite him here, and he's going to do most of the talking. Okay? Go ahead.
Hi, everyone.
Do I hear you?
I don't know if you're hearing me.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. We can hear you.
Yes.
Go ahead. Just go ahead.
Thank you. First, I'll give you a brief of the education sector in Uganda. Ours consists of the pre-primary, primary and secondary, tertiary and vocational levels. Both have the public and the private. But our structure is there are 7 years in primary. Secondary has 6, but the 6 are divided into the 4, and then the 4 for lower secondary and the 2 for upper secondary school. Then after that, someone can take between 3 to 5 years in post-secondary education. Either it's a university, it's a college, it's any vocational institution, either a course or further a degree in whichever field they've chosen to follow. So at whichever level anyway, these schools follow a national curriculum, and it's the National Curriculum Development Center that sets what has to be taught in those levels. And then the examining body is Uganda National Examinations Board. And all these are supervised by the ministry that sets, the Ministry of Education is the one that sets the policies and regulations. At all levels, there is both internal and external assessment of learning, but then there is the national assessments which are done for pupils at the end of each level. There's the primary for primary 7, there's the senior 4, the senior 6, then the colleges and universities are all have assessments at the final time. So that's briefly what the education sector is in Uganda. Specifically about COVID-19's impact on learning, here schools were officially closed on 20th March. That means there are 61 days today since learners went out from school. Now, what happened then? Because the closure was so abrupt. What happened? Some schools provided printed work to these learners when they were going home. But then this could only be done by mainly the urban schools. Those that have the printing facilities, they have the technical people who could set the work very fast, are the ones that provided the work. And some of them have even continued to provide. Learners can come, pick work, go, but mainly that only happens in the urban or semi-urban schools. Rural schools, it's almost, the learners were almost rejoicing. School has broken up, they want to go home, they're okay with it. So that's where we are. Basically, there was no anticipation that we would go all these 61 days. It was so that everybody thought it could take 21 days, 14, or about a month, then we resume. So there was no real concrete program of preparation to cover learning during this period. However, as it became clear that we are going to stay home longer than we thought, there are more measures that have been taken by institutions, by teachers, to ensure that learning continues to take place. So what has happened? More work. Many teachers, many schools have set up programs where they provide work. electronic or hard copy work. They send it to the children through email. They send it to the learners through email, through WhatsApp, through Facebook, through any media, any electronic media they can. And even some conduct these lessons. If a group, if they can gather a group, then they conduct the lesson. Then later, as we went on, about after 30 days of closure, the government, through the National Curriculum Development Center, provided printed work, which they called the Learn at Home program, work that these children had to cover in school till the end of the first term. What I didn't tell you is school year is divided into 3 terms a year of about 90 days, between 85 to 90 days per term. So NCDC got the work that was supposed to be covered in term 1, then they presented it to the parents. How? They printed it, then packed it to the local council district chairpersons, then they had to send it up to the LOC1. LOC1, that's the village, the smallest unit, the local leader of a village that can, so that they could access the work. Then several schools, mainly the private schools, have are running TV programs. They're sponsoring TV programs where they bring their own teachers to teach the children, which is also going on. And then there is also the online for those that can manage to go into platforms like Zoom, but those are very few in Uganda. Consequently, many teachers in this period have not been paid. Why? Because 1, schools are not earning, and 2, they have not offered the service. So for many private school teachers, there has been no pay. Then school fees collection issues. By the time we closed, many had a certain percentage had not cleared the fees. Those ones went away. Then there are those who had fully cleared. We get voices from parents asking what is going to happen to them. They paid for 90 days. They only took about 45, 50. So they also have to, they ask about what they need to get. So those are issues that are going on around here. Now, all these are challenges, but there are those that are always pressing. For instance, while these online programs are going on, not all parents have the smartphones, not all parents have the email access, not all of them are electronic. As a big population in Uganda, just like my colleague in Kenya said, the bigger size of the population is actually still analog. So much as these programs are going on, they're only catering for very, very few to go on. Then getting online requires a lot. You need to have mobile internet, you must pay for data, you must log in. It's a long process. And then when you finally do, there are issues of electrification. Not all areas have electricity. So these services are only limited to those who have power, and then they have power, and they are also, let me say, computer literate. They are electronic also. Then another challenge, like for the secondary school level, just at the start of the year, there was a new curriculum that had been introduced. Already the teachers were struggling to understand it. Then the pupils were, the learners were also not yet aware of it. So now they have to deliver it in the absence of these learners. There is a lot of that confusion. Like I said, some of our parents are illiterate. And when this work is sent to these learners, they have to go to their parents to seek clarity. But then the parents are also unaware. So all of these are issues. There's no assessment, because all that is done is to send the work. Simply send and send and send. But then there's no supervision. Now, recently the president said that the candidate classes, the candidates and the finalists of every level would go back to school but then that also has other conditions that has to it. There has to be social distancing, there has to be masks, there has to be sanitizers. All of these are costs. So a class that could sit 40 now has to sit 20. And for a school manager, you would know that if a class now sits 20, then you need to employ another classroom to sit the other 20, and that would mean another set of staff to cater for those 20. We don't even know if those 20 would be meeting the financial requirements of these programs. So it's all a vicious circle of issues that need to be resolved. What I would think also would be that time has come for many of our countries to rethink many of these programs that we run in school. So the introduction of learning shifts, I think, will be a very big factor, and then to put a lot of effort into the online learning, which has now proven to be the real issue that is needed. Because even after this lockdown, we would cut so many costs if we could use the online learning. Then we all know that not all teachers, like their children and their parents, not all teachers are internet aware. Some don't know how to use it, but then they have to deliver lessons through that. So there's a lot of confusion. And then another bigger challenge that is in all of this is that many African parents, not just here in Uganda, I don't want to think it's not only here in Uganda, there are many African parents who deny their children access to gadgets. And now they find themselves at a time when they must give these children the gadgets, but then the children don't know how to use them. You know, we usually have that mentality that they are spoiling them and everything. So all of these are challenges. The teachers need to be trained in the internet usage, preparation and everything. The learners need to have access to this internet and a lot. And then even on this electronic and online platforms, you find that it's all usually one subject that is delivered to these learners per day. We all know technically that according to normal learning, there would be breaks, but these subjects are learned at least 3, 4 times, 5 times a week. But now they are subject to one session per week, which is usually an hour or less than an hour, between 45 minutes and an hour's time, which is really not the ideal. So basically, not so much differs from the challenges earlier said. That's all I can say. I hope I'm still within the time. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Martha and Jamal, I think, for that insight from Uganda. And again, we're just listening in, and we realize that Kenya, Uganda have a few things in common, just like we have a few things in common with Germany. Again, we are just realizing that the pandemic has affected the education sector, and some of the cries and the challenges teachers are experiencing are similar. Mr. Kadia mentioned about, Rachel mentioned about teachers being over 60, being those in the risk, who are highly at risk, not having to go to school. But here in Uganda, we are complaining about them not being able to use laptops and computers. And yeah, so these are some of the things we will be experiencing. So very quickly, we'll move to Ms. Mohini, Negi, and Ms. Dimple, so that they can give us a perspective from India. So they have, as well, they have 15 minutes. They have 10 minutes.
Am I audible to you? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Okay, I'll begin with giving you an overview of the education sector in India. Just a second. So the education sector in India, it's broadly classified into public and private sector, and it comprises of preschool, primary, and higher secondary education. And the higher education is usually followed by a professional or technical education. But the private schools are highly regulated in form of all aspects of operation for an inclusive and universal education system. So we have free and compulsory education, which is one of the fundamental rights to the children between the ages of 6 and 14. We also have 74% literacy rate and 95% gross enrollment ratio between the age of 6 to 14. The gender inequality, though, has long deterred education for girls in India, but with initiatives such as Beti Bachao and Beti Padhao, that means rescue daughter and educate them, Udan and Pragati, which means flight and progress. Government has taken numerous strategies to improve the girls' education in India. Now, these strategies work to stop female feticide, increase the number of girls attending schools, decrease school dropouts, implement rules regarding the right to education, and address the lower enrollment of girls in colleges. While they also facilitate their transition from higher secondary to higher education through affirmative action and financial aids like scholarships. So it has been a long journey with an even tougher one ahead. The growth in the number of universities and colleges in the country does not correspond to the rate of recruitment and training of teachers. Teaching in itself is not considered to be a lucrative career option, as majority of the students opt for engineering, MBA, MBBS, and various other professional courses. University system is definitely a step up from higher education, but in many parts is still in a state of disrepair. The enrollment rate for higher education is surprisingly low as compared to the school enrollment rate. The government of India is, however, aware of the plight of the higher education, and they strive to internationalize this through this bill called the Foreign University Bill by inviting universities to establish campuses in India so they can bring institutional diversity. So as of this month, the government had a series of meetings in which they could review the education sector and its shortcomings and reform the national education policy. So these reforms will... Pardon? Okay, sorry. So as to bring uniformity in education and providing universal access to quality education.
Now for the...
What's that?
I think you should go ahead. Just go ahead.
Sorry, Ms. Mohini, please proceed.
I think she's...
Ms. Mohini, can you hear us?
Is it you?
Ms. Mohini, please unmute your microphone.
Is this fine?
Yes, now we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
All right, so I was talking about the impact of COVID-19 on learning in India. So April and May are extremely crucial months for us because we conduct board examinations, and these are public examinations that are crucial because it helps students get into universities, professional courses, or training programs and other occupations. Now this year, almost 3 million students awaited their result, and they are all left in a state of uncertainty. And many of my students were actually stuck in transit because they were waiting for their home examination results. Now, it was difficult for us to bring together a digital classroom under such extreme circumstances, since ours is a small school and many students hail from rural families with next to no digital exposure. Often an entire family is sharing the only mode of communication, and siblings attend the class simultaneously on one device. Well, we could not, of course, go to school to gain access to teaching aids and smart screens and broadcast a virtual classroom for all. So for the first time, we faced a situation where the education had to be brought to students' room instead of them coming to the classrooms. Lockdown also meant that the students could not go out to buy school supplies or order them online because all movement except essential services was limited. And the weekly test, quizzes, and the evaluation progress report had to be made completely digitized. Teachers were just as new to the system as the students were, and it took us a while to get to understand it and actually get used to it. So to ensure that their learning continues, we came to the realization that to ask a student to use their device for more than 4 to 5 hours is actually asking for too much. And this actually includes the time they are spending doing their homework. Because they did not have the time to purchase physical books in between examinations, their books are also available in digital format. Now, prolonged use of devices is very bad for their overall physical and mental well-being. And during the trial classes that we held, a few students actually complained about eye strain and subsequent headaches, which made them so much less enthusiastic about online learning. So to ensure that they did not drop out of these classes and that their learning continued, we formulated an objective approach and tried to deliver more qualitative and engaging reading and exercise material to them. An ecosystem had to be created which uses existing digital tools and applications such as WhatsApp, Google Forms, and Google Sheets. And we connected first with over 100 students every day. And when we realized that this method was actually successful, we replicated it throughout the entire school. And now over 500 students have daily classes, regardless of where they are. All evaluations were objective question-based, assignments and subjective tests were replaced by pop-up quizzes and oral evaluation, and one day of the week was designated as a mental health day, where the students could discuss non-academic topics and how the pandemic is affecting them. And to encourage them to keep up a healthy lifestyle, we had our physical education teachers teach them yoga exercises and meditation that could essentially be done indoors. So our objective is not just to have them finish their curriculum for this academic year, but to mentally prepare them for a world that is going to be so much different from the world we locked us out from. Now, the challenges that come with the interventions that were put in place to ensure that the learning continues. So as we have observed that this pandemic has disrupted in an entire generation's education, like Winnie earlier told in her presentation, that online learning as compared to face-to-face learning brings forth significant challenges of its own. There is a lack of human contact, absence of opportunities for learning. There is absolutely no teaching supervision. And perhaps the most deeply felt was the lack of hands-on learning in complex subjects, which calls for lab work and live experiments. Even though we have turned from the set precedents of lecture classroom online to active learning in virtual classroom, it will be nearly impossible to take students out for field studies and social experiments for a while. In some cases, if the device student used to access this classroom breaks down, it is hard to replace it, and it will become extremely difficult to bring them back online and thus disrupting the stopgap arrangement. Now, internet availability in India has increased, but it still does not match up the increased demand as the Indian household equipped with internet facilities in urban areas is just 23.8% and 14.9% in rural areas. And that's a major share of Indian students missing out on education, and it's creating a digital divide, which will have direct implications on our country's development trajectory in the near future. And talk about the learnings that we have based on how education has been affected by the pandemic. The closure of schools, colleges, according to the UNESCO report that she showed us earlier, it has affected over 87% of all the world's students. The suspension of examinations indefinitely, it has certainly jeopardized the academic calendars. The most serious threat is a shift of few months in the academic year all over the world, which places immense pressure on teachers and students in their final years, as there is no certainty to when regular classes will eventually take place. As the world slowly gets back to normalcy, we might witness a shrunk job market and overcrowded institutions, which will affect an entire generation and society as a whole. In order to prepare the students for this plausible eventuality, we are encouraging them to make this experience effective and diverse, to focus on building their skill set instead of rote learning and extreme focalization on grades, and to treat this phase as an exceptional opportunity to learn. Now that the children have unlimited time and resources which can be used for real learning by involving e-classes, games, video shoots, and a lot of other activities in their daily routine. We have also noticed the shift in family dynamics as the parental involvement in children's education has increased, and are using this as a wonderful opportunity by assigning them work that makes homework a collaborative activity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohini, for giving us a perspective from India. We really appreciate that insight. So just a quick one, if you click on the chat box on your screens, you can then proceed to post any question that you might have for our presenters today. So just post and you can indicate who the question is being directed to. And so because of time, we'll quickly move to Ms. Caroline Onyango, who will give us a perspective from the United States of America. She's in the state of Arizona. So please, Caroline, you have 10 minutes.
All right. Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
All right. Well, listening to all the conversation, it's almost like the impact is the same on all the learners. Well, I'll start with a quick overview of education in Arizona. We are a K-12. The whole United States has kindergarten to 12th grade. And pretty much after that, it's a 2-year in a community college to get an associate, or you go for your 4 years to get your bachelor's. Now, elementary is divided into 3 groups. We have K-5, and then we have a middle school, which does 6 through 8, and then they go to their high school, 9 through 12. Now, for us, since our school year normally begins in August through May, we have our calendar year divided into 4 quarters, so, and different breaks in between. So when the COVID came in, the infection started and the schools were closing down, most of our kids were on what we call the spring break. And that would be, we were doing our last break and going in for a final 9 weeks and school would be over. Because right now, actually, this is the last week for schools in Arizona to officially close. So I would say we were out for the last 9 weeks, but normally that's the same time that we are having our end of year exams. In the United States, students start doing their state exams from 3rd grade. So from 3rd grade all the way to 12th grade, students have their exams. So we get out of spring break and we go back in. Pretty much it's more of a review because we get to prepare the kids for their exams. So most of I would say we were done 3/4 to the curriculum, and completion of the standards were 3/4 way done. So not much at that time, not so, I wouldn't say they've lost so much. It was more teaching them to master what they already had been taught that was missing. And so, in our schools, I would say, since generally we wouldn't say we don't use technology. Technology is a huge part of education here. So even in the classroom, generally every day you'd be expected to use technology with your students. So in my case and most of us teachers around, you'd find the students already had access to a Google class, which you were expected to use prior during the year. So even though they went home, it was a matter of just making sure every student had access to a computer and the internet per se. And those who did not have internet, the school districts were obligated to buy them like skill books. So they had 3rd graders got all their books that were more having all the 3rd grade reading, math, and the core subjects. They were expected to give books to those students who were not able to have access to their Google Classrooms, which is what our school did. And so as a teacher, and most teachers, you just expected to, every week you had to create a learning plan. So it's almost like you had your lesson plans, but you geared it to what the students were supposed to learn. And the only, I would say, another saving grace that happened was our curriculum, in as much as we have the textbooks and the practice books, physical ones, most of our curriculum is also online. And this is something we were already using before this COVID infection came in. So the students actually knew. So all we had to do was just kind of educating the parents to set the students up. But pretty much all the students knew. So if you told them just go to your Google class, they would go straight to the class and they knew how to access the assignments. The only thing is, like I said, we still have, just like everybody has said, the economic status just it's hard for us to reach every student the right way. So I have students who, even through that 8-week period, did not at a single time get into the Google class. But for those students, we were mandated, it was a requirement pretty much that you as a teacher had to be in contact with all families with like twice a week. At the beginning of the week, you had to call them or email, and then at the end of the week, and you kind of had to give a report. So you kind of log in what the contact was and see how they were doing with either the Google class was okay because you could see what they were doing. But when it comes to those who are only using the books, we have parents who would take pictures of their kids' work, and you could go from there to see how to meet them. The only population that I think are going to be worst hit are the at-risk students. So these students who are already struggling in the classroom, and then most likely, normally those are the students that have very individualized interventions with the teacher and the school. So them being out for all this time, you realize that the same ones who are going to fall even further behind. And then we usually have one of our population that has disabilities. In the school, they have all these individualized interventions, but even like all the participants have said, the relationship, the face-to-face, the relationship between a teacher and a student is completely different from the way the student will react when they're learning, when they're with their parents only. And so that one is another place that will really be hard hit, because it's normally, even if you go out for 2 weeks, those are the students that they come back to class and for some reason they didn't even get a chance to pick a book. So all their skills are out and you're always trying to just make sure they are back to normal, I would say, a little bit of normalcy. Now, I would say the challenges that we have, like the first and most important one was the student-to-teacher relationship. It's tough to maintain online. First of all, the students find it so weird just looking at you, that you're the same one talking to them through the screen. And it's so hard. And having parents around too, they act very differently from the way they act with you in the classroom. Two was the access to resources. Not all families have the same resources. And then, like you maybe probably heard how bad unemployment has become right now. Most of our parents have lost their jobs. And so as a teacher, you have to figure out, is this a student you have to keep forcing to come to the classroom and do their work, because the parents must also be stressed. So as teachers, we almost went into the mode of being social workers in a way, because you had to make sure the kids, you have to engage together at the beginning of the week just to see how they are. And then at the end of the week, you also kind of engage with them without bringing in the academics. So you had to do something on the side, like on the Google Meets, you had to schedule like just a phone call with the kids and then talk to their family and see how they're doing. And from then you get to figure out what to do. And so for some of the kids with all the mental stuff that's going on, the emotional stuff that's going on, I don't think there's much learning that they did. Because if a parent said they're not able to do any work for that week or even those days, there's nothing you can do as a teacher other than just try to encourage it. Because if I'm a parent that has lost my job, I mean, the first thing I would be looking for is making sure they can eat, as opposed to, do I really need to sit down with this same student and do work with them? And then we have the barrier of language. Like I also teach the English language learners where parents speak only Spanish right now. So for those students, I had to use translators, and you're always translating things, because right now, parents are the advocates for their kids. And they're the ones that can see if the kids are struggling to let me know immediately so that I can remediate. So if a parent is not, and we know just because of the language barriers, some parents are a little bit shy to come forward and actually just say, my child is struggling in this. So we had to use translators, and in the translation, sometimes things get lost, or it takes 2-3 days before it's translated and coming back to you. And that's a big thing for the English language learners. And maintaining motivation for the distance learning. So when we went back at the beginning, it was pretty good, because the key thing is we used our same classroom routines. So we just used exactly what we did in the classroom. We did not change much, so that the kids already had the know-how of how to actually do the assignment and what was expected, so that the parents didn't feel too stressed. But as the weeks go on, and especially with the younger kids, it's hard to maintain their motivation to go back to class every morning and do the work as expected. So by the time we're doing like the last 2 weeks of school, wow, it was a struggle. You could see the numbers dwindling, and like people missing classroom. And if you call, maybe they'll come for one more, and not. It was just pretty hard to meet all the learners as I would have liked. Now, the other thing is health-wise, as a teacher, I mean, as teachers and even as students, in as much as the PE teachers and the others were still expected to engage with the students, and we had to do a lot of physical education, physical stuff with the students online. As a teacher right now, I'm worried more of even the teacher's health, because this working when you're sitting down is so bad, I would say, for me especially. I'm used to walking around and walking in the classroom with the kids and doing stuff. So having to sit and wait and teach sitting down, I don't think it's pretty good. You have to really teachers will have to take the extra step to make sure that they are actually taking care of themselves. And for that, we have our counselors had to come in and work with teachers too. So that's where we are at this point. And we've closed school for right now. We're just looking forward to what's come next year, which we have not arranged yet. And that's it for now. The other things were pretty much the same for all the participants said. So.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Caroline, for giving us. Thank you so much for giving us a perspective from the United States, and it's interesting to hear from all the 5 panelists what's happening in their countries. So we will quickly move to the question and answer session, which will be moderated by our CEO, Mr. Kwame Owino. So I'll hand this over to Kwame. Kwame.
Okay, thanks a lot to all the 5. I mean, wherever you are, I think you should clap for them. I don't know whether they'll hear or not, but I think we owe them some applause. One of the things that I've seen, yes, one of the things that I've seen spoken about, not today, but everybody seems to say, is that the world is coming to appreciate how difficult the job of a teacher and that of a nurse is. And those who say that think they're being clever, but what I tell them is then which part of the world have they lived in? I mean, the teacher's world has always been a complicated, difficult one. I think this crisis is just confirming to us how difficult that job is. So to all these teachers here, thank you very much. You appreciate it. And I think how the world turns out will depend on the work you do with the kids that you work with. So thanks a lot. I need to give you that. Now, we have some couple of questions. So I won't try to summarize, partly because we have some people woke up at 5 to be here. But we have a couple of questions, and they're just 2. I'd like to let you know that there's a facility for raising your hand. So if you'd like to ask additional questions, please use there's a bar and there's a facility for raising your hand. So if you click on it, I'll be able to see you, and then I'll point to you and you can raise your hand. But in the meantime, there are two questions. One question is about to Ms. Mohini. So the question is, when and how do you plan to reopen the schools in India? So basically what the question here is that, are you aware of any plans by government, whether state or national government, for schools to be reopened? So that's one. The second question, which also goes to all the panelists, is from Joanne, and it asks, how do you identify students who may be struggling with class for different reasons, and how do you help each of them individually? I think you all alluded to it. Rachel spoke about that. Ms. Mohini spoke about that as well. And Carol, of course, also spoke about that, and specifically about the fact that I am so glad that as teachers, you all recognize that kids, all of them, of course, deserve to learn, but they have different paces. And one other thing is that given the kind of shock that came through COVID-19 and having to open schools or readjust the way the curriculum is delivered, it's actually driving a wedge between students by making some, on account of their social background or other factors, just different. So maybe all of you can actually answer that question, because there are two questions for Ms. Mohini. I'll ask you to answer first. When do you think the government of India will approve the reopening of schools, and what adjustments might that require of you? And then you can go to question 2 as well, which is basically, are there ways that, or have you identified some ways in which some kids are struggling, especially given the adjustments that you have to make now? And then I'll go to the other panelists, one after the other, to also answer question 2 as well. So let's start with you, Ms. Mohini. Go ahead. Mohini, your microphone is switched off. Please switch on your microphone. It's muted. Please switch it on so that we can hear you.
Yes, it's very difficult to say at this point that when the schools will open, because we don't have a very clear picture. As the schools close the first, so they will be the last to open, and digital education is going on, but it's not replacing the traditional education, but it's just an aid. When the schools do open eventually, the choice to attend and how many students turn up will depend on the parents. There's a fear, and how the students will react, and what will be the guidelines for physical distancing, because it is a age group that understands the distancing, but the little ones, those who are in kindergarten, they really don't understand that what is physical distancing. Now the pandemic may seem a huge setback, but we hope that some good will come and we all will be back soon and things will be as they were.
Dimple, do you have a comment? Do you have an idea about when schools might reopen in India?
Yeah, I think it will take a while because there is not a strategy in place as of yet. And I would address the second question that someone asked is, how do we identify the students who are lagging and what do we do for them? Well, we ask for the individual feedbacks about the lessons that we provide them. And if they do not understand it, we actually hold extra classes for them and they can attend it when they are free. And we link them to YouTube tutorials, and we basically try to break down the structure so that it's easy for them to understand. We can't hear you. Your mic is mute.
Kwame, you're on mute.
Kwame, you're muted.
Mute me. Winnie, unmute me.
We can hear you now, Kwame. Proceed.
No, it's muted again.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay, fine. So next is Martha. Martha, can you go ahead with your answers? Martha, we are waiting for you. Can you hear us? Martha? Okay,
Yes.
I'll cycle now. Yes, please go ahead, please.
May I repeat the question, please?
What's the question?
Well, the question is a general question that came from Joanne, and the question is, are there ways in which you are able to identify students who are struggling in order to give them special attention at this time?
No.
There isn't anywhere we are able to, basically because, like I highlighted in the challenges, the lessons going on are actually one way. They are only the learners receiving. There is very, very, very minimal feedback, not even up to 2%. Someone is able to send a voice note on WhatsApp or a question on text, but that's very, very minimal. So basically, we cannot, we are unable to know where this child is having challenges. And then for the other question, when the schools plan to reopen, there is no clear strategy right now. Not until we complete the 21 days of the lockdown that were extended, and today is day 2 of those 21. That's when we shall have a plan or a glare of hope on what is going to happen next. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Okadia?
Okay, I think it's difficult to be able to identify students that are struggling unless they say, because sometimes you don't see them. So if they don't talk, it's very difficult for you to do it. So we encourage them to ask questions. We encourage them to send a line. We encourage them to call you later, and we're able to attend to them when they do that. But if they just keep quiet, it's hard to tell because sometimes you don't even see their faces.
Comment, please unmute.
When do you think we might open in Kenya? When do you think it would be appropriate for Kenya to reopen schools?
I think it's hard for me to be able to tell now because as it is, I think the CS for Education called for a task force that is giving in suggestions on how to go about it. And I think they were supposed to be coming out with the results was it today or tomorrow or somehow this week. So it's hard to tell really. We can't tell.
Okay.
But
okay,
we doubt that it will be in June.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go now to Martha. Sorry, to Rachel, please. Rachel.
So basically identifying students who are struggling, I think in a primary setup, you most of the time we engage the students and already know who has issues or who had issues prior to COVID. So even when we were moving on to online learning, we already had these kids in view and knew we have to put like extra work in relation to these children. So the issue is not really how do we take care of them, because we already wrote the parents, your child will always have an extra lesson or an extra slot. There'll be extra calls just to make sure they're really coming with us like they're supposed to, and we don't leave anyone behind. But what I also realized with online learning is some learners, like the very agile ones in class, were suddenly very shy in front of cameras and participation changed. Like a child who's an overperformer suddenly is underperformer because this is also strange and this is also new. And in as much as we forced them, we had forced feedback at the end of the lesson. You have a day, they have timelines. You have to submit your homework by this and this time, and I go through it and return it back to you. And that's what Caroline also meant, that teachers were really overworked, especially if you're a parent yourself. Then basically it's the children who suffer at the end of the day. And they would send their work, and I think what developed countries probably have, which most we don't have back home, is we have a lot of helicopter parenting also. So you have a child who's an average student and all of a sudden performing very well. And you look at the work and know this cannot be your work. I had enough of those where you're just so sure this is your mom or your brother or someone else who's older than you who did this. So my problem was not really the underperformers per se, but the overperformers because they're faking the grade. And for the underperformers, what we had was basically a teacher had a 90-minute slot. So 2 learning groups, 30 minutes, and then you have 1 hour lesson to call each and every child in who did not participate in the lesson, where I have a feeling you didn't perform or you didn't understand. And of course, it's difficult gauging because now Teams has 6 faces. I can see several faces. 3 weeks ago, I could only see 2, at most 4 faces, so I could not see them. And some kids, when you call them and ask them a question, they'll just leave and come back in, or they would type you the answer and everyone else wants to hear it. So those are the children who you write and tell, I need to see you in my extra hour, or I'll offer you and your parent. We went out of our way to call parents and their children and tell them it's 6 p.m., you went to work, you're tired, but your child is losing out on something. So I need a 30-minute slot with your family in the evening. So that's how we got them to submit assignments. And then of course you also identify the attention span. It's very difficult for a young mind to concentrate looking at a screen for 30 minutes. I don't know how grown-ups do it. I'm so used to walking everywhere and being with people, and this was the first time I, as a teacher, am challenged to sit down. As a lecturer, you're also always moving around. You're never seated in front of a screen. So this is a new thing for a grown-up, and children are actually more challenged, and their attention span is very minimal. So when I realized that a kid is just gone, you realize they're wandering, they're looking into their houses. Most of them are having lessons in their bedrooms or in their kitchens. And there's everything else that's more interesting than what you're saying probably at that moment. So for such children, you offer them an extra lesson, you call them in, you write the parent a mail, you make the call or do something.
Okay, thanks. Caroline, how do you identify students who are struggling? And yeah. I think your mic is muted. Please unmute your mic. Your microphone is muted.
Tommy,
yes?
Can please proceed, because I think her microphone has an issue. So just as we'll sort it out while we proceed.
Okay, fine. I've received a third question. And that third question is, Eric has said that, provided on the chat, has said that my spouse is a Kenyan teacher and she advised me to develop social learning platforms. So it's achieve.co.ke for Kenya. Now students can share learning material from this platform. The challenge is getting teachers to contribute. So I guess that's informational, but I'm just asking all the teachers once again, and circle the panelists, and I'll ask you again whether anybody has, are there open source materials that you've been using or that you have found more recently or that you have contributed to and which might be useful for your kids, for your learners and even for yourselves as you prepare. So this time I'll start with Rachel. Rachel.
Sorry, could you please repeat the question again?
Eric has just mentioned that he's developed a platform and has provided learning materials, yes, and that they're available for everybody, and asking whether teachers have, his wife is a teacher, he developed the platform and has made it available for people, and some students are using it, but I think he suggests that teachers are not contributing as much. So I'm just asking whether, in your experience, have you seen someone respond by developing available tools for you to do your learning, to do your teaching or to contribute?
Oh yes, there's lots of tools out there that have been developed that were previously there anyway to help teachers in their work. And we've used lots of them. Many of them were made free. Ideally, you always have to buy a license or something to use them. But it was now, because of COVID, everything was like basically free for families to access. And I've also seen many teachers that I know and friends also just resort to developing their own programs and learning tools to help learners cope with stuff. With such things, as he says, it's not being used a lot. I think it's just the exposure. Like in our case, many times, if you don't know, you're not going to use it. So I think if parents and children are aware that stuff like that are out there, then they're definitely going to make a use of it.
Next, God.
Was my microphone off all that time?
No, it was on. It was on, so we could hear you. So next, can we go to Dimple and Mohini? Do you have any tools available in India for people to use that are in the open domain? I mean, the public domain for you to use as you either for preparation or to contribute to?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Yeah. In India, there is less internet availability here, right? So we have to use a messenger that creates a network of all the available phones in the area, like applications like Fire Chat. So we don't have to be dependent on the internet. And students who don't have internet can still access their classes.
Okay, thank you. What about Mrs. Okadia? Do you have any tools that you've seen besides the ones that you mentioned that are developed outside by private people and made available for teachers either to contribute to build up on, or to use for teaching?
Yeah, we do have quite a number of them, and yeah, they are those ones that you can be able to put in something into, and then you can also get a lot of notes. You can get they are there. There are many.
Okay, could you let us know about the quality? What do you think about the quality?
Some of them are okay. Some are, you can see some of them just want to make money, but most of them are good. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Let's see if we can come to Caroline now. Is she ready? Caroline, are you ready now? Okay. I'll go to the final set of questions, and then I think we'll have to set up Caroline to speak last. The final question is from Martha, and she says, as teachers, do you think that we can go back to the traditional ways of teaching? I mean, I think what she's asking is a question I've had in my mind. In what ways do you think teaching and generally education delivery at your levels will change permanently? And what are the things that you think are just transitory, in the sense that as soon as the public affairs, or rather, as soon as governments get a view about what the real risks of COVID-19 are, and as soon as we are able to adjust, then we'll be able to make we'll revert to the familiar ways in which education was delivered in your environment. I'll start here with Martha, and then I'll circle the table. So Martha, please.
Thank you. I think there is a great need to rethink. This should be an eye-opener. This COVID-19 should be an eye-opener to us. The way we've been teaching, the way we've been delivering, the modes we've been using, the access we have to these technologies. This must be a time when we rethink how to use them, train the teachers on how to use them, and also make many of these services accessible to everybody, the teachers, the learners, the parents, and everything. Then secondly, this has shown us that learning must be a shared thing. Everyone has a stake, and every stakeholder must try as much as possible to fulfill their part. The parent must do their part, the learner has a part to do, as a teacher I have a part to do, then the services the government has provided must come quickly, so that the whole system, the whole learning process takes place more quickly. So to be precise, yes, there has to be a rethink of how we teach our children. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. What about Rachel? Do you think there are some things that are going to change, and which are those? And are there things that will be okay as soon as we understand how to handle the spread of COVID?
Indeed, many things are going to change, and I must say I'm now, I think in this panel, in the fortunate position to be in a system that's already back to work. So my school, for instance, has already decided that our children will be coming to school thrice a week, and twice a week they'll be taught back home, because we talk of digitization, worldwide digitization, and the only way we can enable them is actually by forcing them to get into this situation where they really have to do it by themselves. So previously we've had children as young as 9 years old being forced to do presentations, PowerPoint presentations and stuff. And we realized, well, we've done that well, and it's good, but we've not taught them how to generally use the internet to access education and stuff like that. So that is changing in my institution. It is changing, and I can talk from the perspective of the school that there's also lots of trainings being advertised now by the government for teachers to go and learn how to move around the digital world. And that's a good thing. And from the perspective of the university where I am as well, we just had a meeting last week, and we were like, we have to teach our university graduate students how to teach children no matter what circumstances come, because it's not just the COVID pandemic we are facing that is forcing us to do that. But ideally, we will always have children who can't come to school because they're critically ill and stuff like that. And these children, whenever they're in hospital or wherever they are, be it just at home, they don't have access to classroom education. So how do we access these children? How do we teach them how to teach such children who are not present without really breaking their backs by going the extra mile, doing a lot of overtime work? So yes, it is going to change a lot.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask Dimple and Ms. Mohini Negi, what do you think is going to change in Indian education based on the COVID-19 shock, and what do you think is going to stay the same as soon as governments get a way to handle the transmission of disease?
I think that the pace of traditional teaching will not undergo extreme changes. There will be, however, subtle changes in the grander scheme of things. We will be definitely establishing a symbiotic relationship between digital and physical teaching. And we'll probably focus on social distancing post-lockdown, and we'll have an odd and even number of days we call the students to schools. And we will have to digitally expose our teachers, because like we have heard in the presentations that the teachers that taught us are not, they don't have digital experience. So the first and the foremost step would be to help them learn the digital tools and then take the education to the children's doorstep.
Okay, thank you. What about Mrs. Akadia? What do you think is going to change about Kenyan education, and what is going to stay the same?
Okay, I think in Kenya, we might not change much, but definitely we must make some strides. Like, I think we need to embrace the parents more. And thankfully, CBC is already doing that. There's a lot of parent participation in the incoming education system. So embracing the parents more so that they can be able to help the children, so that not just when they're in school, but even when they're outside school. And probably the government to rethink. There's a time the government of Kenya was thinking about this digitalized learning in school, and they were giving the students laptop, tablets. I think we need to rethink that so that our students can access this, and again, train more teachers. There are just a few of us who can be able to use the IT gadgets. Not all of us can. So training of teachers, use of gadgets and accessing them to schools and to the students, and then embracing the parents. I think that will help.
Okay, thank you. I know we're about to, but I'll give Caroline an opportunity to answer those three questions. What's changing about it? What's going to change or not going to change about education? And then, of course, you can also comment on how you determine what students need help and how you respond to that recognition. Caroline, go ahead. Are you?
Sorry, Kwame, she's still having technical problems, so.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
wow. And we're about to conclude, so it's, wow, okay.
But she's listening in, she's listening
yes.
in.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Well, because we have three, I was going to give each of them a final 2 minutes to just sum up. Because we agreed, and of course it's much later. We've had 2 hours already of sitting, and each of them has given us fantastic insights. So let me start once again. I'll circle the table, and this time I'll start with the extreme east, and coming forward. So I'll start with Ms. Mohini and Dimple. Please give us any final comments or any questions that you still have, or summary that you can make regarding the discussion today, but obviously about what this means for teaching generally, what governments and parents could do better, and how to equip teachers to continue to be effective. So let's start with Dimple and Mohini. Please go ahead.
I think it will be extremely essential to prepare the students for a post-lockdown world, which will see cramming of educational institutions. And we'll have a burden, a never before witnessed burden on teachers and the finalist students, because the academic years has been shifted. So we have to abridge the gap and help them catch up. So this is going to be really difficult to do, but we'll do it eventually.
Okay, thank you very much. What about your mom? Does she have any comments?
Oh, she just got an emergency. Yeah, she just got an emergency call.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, I'll go now to Martha. Martha, any final comments?
Thank you very much. We believe from our side of things, the government has a big stake in this. And I think they have to rethink our education system with the help of our teachers, starting with their education, their technical education, and then our children. We have a lot of kids who come from very unprivileged backgrounds and parents who need the support too. So it really goes to the government. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Does your colleague have anything to say? Any concluding remarks?
Say something.
Thank you so much for this session. Like Shah said, a lot has to be put in especially in training the teachers and equipping them with the skills that they need to deliver these lessons like they are doing in such a time. The online, the internet-based, and everything. They need a lot of training, a lot of support, and a lot of facilitation in that area. And then as we also educate the parents on what their role should be in ensuring that such programs can take place efficiently and providing the support. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. What about you, Rachel? Any concluding remarks about what? Go ahead.
Well, I think the society as a large needs to rethink what education basically means, because we've done a lot of, or I did a lot of online teaching, but we also realize at the same time that there is education that can happen at home. Like I teach sciences, I'm a scientist, so I had to rethink, if I can't do this 1, 2, 3, if I can't teach them what a base and an acid is in class, how do I teach it to them from their kitchens at home? How do I make school very practical in their house for the student and make them understand it, even if their mom is selling vegetables at a market somewhere and has zero understanding of it? So we really need to think teacher training, reinvent how we educate people, and reinvent how we train future teachers. So that is my take for this. It's been a wake-up call to reinvent a lot of things.
Okay, thank you. I'll come to Mrs. Okadia. What about you? Any concluding comments?
Okay, I think for me, I would say that this has shown how important the interactions are with the teacher, and we cannot downplay that. But then we need to come up, especially the Kenya Institute of Curricular Development should really come up with online programs that are meant for the student, because yes, we do have some of those things online, but then they're just from people who want to be relevant because of the situation. So it's showing that there's a gap from KICD to actually have proper lessons for the students so that everybody who is a teacher can go back to them and do them online. Yeah, I think for me, that is the big thing. And of course, the government seeing how the less advantaged students can be locked in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Caroline, she's going to make some comments now. Caroline, can you make your comments?
Yes, well, the way forward, one more thing is, I think the willingness to be flexible, first, as everybody should be willing to be flexible and change. Because right now, when it's taking too long, they say, okay, go to your online classes, and you take too long to make the shift. This is actually just a disadvantage on both sides. So I think people really have to be willing to change and adapt to whatever's coming in. Because even us within the United States, we have very good programs. But during the school year, I mean, as teachers, just like someone said, most of the older teachers, per se, like the old school learning, find it so hard to use the online resources. And so if your kids do not know how to use the online resources, then even though they're there, they're not going to be able to use it. So I mean, like Mrs. Rikedi just said, maybe Kenya per se should be thinking of developing programs that can be used. Because here we have programs that can teach kids how to read, even regardless of me, the teacher, being there. So the need for having programs that are student geared is very important. And for teachers, we just love to adapt. And my other partners are the parents. Parents have to right now know that they are their kids' advocates. Because if you don't tell me exactly what's going on with your child right now, then you will be losing with your child. Because if I'm not able to be face-to-face time with them, then you need to be sure and come out and tell me this is what they need and this is how you can help us. So that collaboration must be there. And technology is not all evil. So even right now, I mean, people have to remember, parents, we normally, technology, so we shift this thing of only giving the kids technology as a means for entertainment only. So we have to shift their mindset and know that technology can be used for learning now and not just for entertainment.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll just say two things. The first one is that we actually understand that nothing affects society as much as COVID has without touching on education for reasons that are obvious. I mean, education prepares us, it's an ongoing thing. And in many countries, it's the biggest industry in terms of the number of people who attend, whether we're going to school on the demand side and teachers on the supply side. I think for that reason, we at the Institute of Economic Affairs made the right decision to try and have this conversation. And we've had quite a bit from a number of teachers in different contexts. Now, there are things that are different, of course, depending on resources that are available. But the major resource still stands as that of the teacher, whether standing in class or sitting back there, but guiding children. And they do more than just making sure that children can add up, read, or actually conduct scientific experiments. As we've seen more almost globally, teachers are actually also social workers, responding to the needs that children have and also having to interact. The third is, I see a tendency for people to think that technology can't replace teachers. I've actually been convinced here that it can only be complementary to the role of a teacher. It can enhance how a teacher performs. But the idea that you can then put lessons out there, have 6 million kids plug in and then reduce the number of teachers, I'm actually seeing that will not be possible. And if you think about it in the context of COVID, if we have to make classes smaller, it means the recruitment of teachers and the training of teachers is a new agenda for public policy institutions such as ourselves. The final one is that as we thought about it, actually, the responses that government took, and government took many responses across the world, it contributed differently, but one of the things that it has actually shifted the role of teachers by adding burdens to them. I mean, as we heard, if you have to call a student to make sure that they attended, you're also attending to classes. So one sector that's changed quite substantially, but in other ways is also going to have to stay, is actually teachers. So my view is that classrooms are not going to end. I think we've just extended the classrooms beyond the physical classroom into the virtual one. but classrooms are going to have to end. We've spoken about maybe we should have a different conversation about what quality teaching would be in these circumstances. And so, ladies, mostly, and the gentlemen, we hope we can have these conversations going ahead. But I'm too grateful that you all took time. I think it's very early in many places, it's late in others, but I'm glad that we've all seen it. I think one other thing about education is we've seen the fantastic generational representation in education from teachers of different generations, and obviously a younger population, starting from kids all the way to high school kids who are all in there. So it's something that ties society to the problems of education or the challenges that education faces in these and other times that will come in the future have to be solved by society. So I think it's not going to end anywhere. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm particularly glad for our 6 presenters. Largely, oh yes, one other thing that I've noticed, and I say this not tongue in cheek, but as seriously, is that teaching is such a difficult and dynamic job, but the role and the burden of ensuring that our kids learn substantially falls on the backs of the world's women, right? And female teachers, because many of them are teachers. So we have to applaud you and thank you very much for all continuing to do that. Of course, it's supported by men as well, as we can see, but it's largely something that falls. So if we are fixing teaching, I think it means we are bringing the minds of the world's women to help us solve a significant development problem into the future and right now. So I'd like to thank you very much. The IEA will get in touch with each and every one of you. We have a token for all the 6 teachers who gave us their minds and also taught us a little bit, quite a bit as well. And I'd like to also announce that for all of you as well, next week on Tuesday or on a date that we will announce, we'll be speaking to a different round of teachers from Australia, I think from South Africa and other parts of the world. If you can log in or you can, please do. If you can't, we'll provide a link and you can watch it. But our view as IEA is to continue to actually bring these conversations because there are some ways in which COVID has affected the whole world in some ways and in other ways not. And some of these issues would actually also probably be shared. Resources are available out there as I've learned as well, but we're very thankful for all of you for being here and for the audience. I mean, sitting in on an afternoon on a Thursday, taking all your time to sit in with us. We are grateful and for the questions that you asked, and this conversation will continue. We hope you'll be able to have time and do this with us as well. So speaking of Mohini, Dimple, Caroline Onyango, thank you very much. Who went to school with me, for those who'd like to know. Rachel, thank you very much. Martha, thank you. And Mrs. Nelly Okadia, we thank you and we salute you for the important work that you do for today and for the generations of the future, which will determine whether this world survives. And I think because you're all very perceptive people, you will solve this problem for us and the world will be better, I promise. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon and a good evening. Thanks a lot. Oh, and to Winnie, who fixed it and managed to get all of you to speak at this time. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.